Giribardari. Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Ramo Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajikacharya Parasaka Shri Śrimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to Simul devotees. All glories to Simul devotees. All glories to Simul devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaham Dadati swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Bitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, am I correct that we're today on Canto 3, Chapter 26, Text 53 and 54? Okay. I've got a one-line purport. So that kind of leaves me open to say anything I want. So I think the way we should probably do this is I'm going to read the Sanskrit on the first one, which doesn't have any purport, and then we can collectively read the Sanskrit on the second one, which does have a purport, albeit very short purport. Haranmayad andakoshad utaya shalile sayat tam avishya mahadeho bahudha nirbibhedhakam. And this translates, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Virat Purush, situated himself in that golden egg which was lying on the water, and he divided it into many departments. So I'll reread that. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Virat Purush, situated himself in that golden egg which was lying on the water, and he divided it into many departments. Now we'll collectively read the Sanskrit here. Nirbidyatasya pratanam Nirbidyatasya pratanam Nirbidyatasya pratanam Mukham vani tato bhavat Mukham vani tato bhavat Vanya vahnir ato nase Vanyana vahnir ato nase Pranoto grana etayo Pranoto grana etayo. Nirbidyatasya prathamam. Mukham vani tato bhavat. Vanya vahnir ato nase. Pranoto grana etayo. Please chant. Nirbidyatasya prathamam. Mukham vani tato bhavat. Vanya vanhir ato nase. Pranoto grana etayo. Nirbidyatasya prathamam. Mukham vani tato bhavet. Vanya vanhir ato nase. Pranoto grana etayo. Nirhabidyatasya pratamam. Mukham vani tato bhavat. Vanya vanhir nato yase. Pranoto grana eta. Nirhabidyasya pratamam. Mukham vani tato bhavat. Vanya vanhir nato nase. Pranoto grana etayo. Go ahead. Okay. Nirabidyata appeared. Asya of him. Pratamam, first of all. Mukham, a mouth. Vani, organ of speech. Tataha, then. Abhavat, came forth. Vanya, with the organ of speech. Vanihi, the god of fire. Ataha, then. Nase, the two nostrils. Prana, the vital air. Utaha, joined. Granaha, the olfactory sense. Etayo, in them. So the verse then reads, first of all, a mouth appeared in him, and then came forth the organ of speech, and with it the god of fire, the deity who presides over that organ. Then a pair of nostrils appeared, and in them appeared the olfactory sense, as well as the prana, the vital air. So we can responsibly recite this. First of all, a mouth appeared in him, and then came forth the organ of speech, and with it the god of fire, the deity who presides over that organ. Then a pair of nostrils appeared, and in them appeared the olfactory sense, as well as the prana, the vital air. Okay, so here is the purport. With the manifestation of speech, fire also became manifest. And with the manifestation of the nostrils, the vital air, the breathing process, and the sense of smell also became manifest. Nirabidyatasya pratanmam mukham vani tato bhavat vanyhavanir ato nase pranoto grana etayo. First of all, a mouth appeared in him, and then came forth the organ of speech, and with it the god of fire, the deity who presides over that organ. Then a pair of nostrils appeared, and in them appeared the olfactory sense as well as prana, the vital air. So in this part of Bhāgavatam, we've got a ringside seat watching the whole universe unfold. And there is a sequence of things happening. So we first see one thing happen, and another thing happens, and another thing happens. And this has been described as cause and effect. So cause and effect in itself is kind of a mysterious thing. Because what we see happening after something else is, by its very nature, we conclude it to be the effect that is produced by the cause. When we see two things happen one after one another, we usually think of the second thing as the effect and the first thing as the cause. They may not, in fact, be cause and effect. Actually, there's a Latin term, post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means that after this, therefore, because of this. But that's a fallacy, usually, we consider as in discussing something, post hoc ergo propter hoc. But the mind will do this. And actually, this begins to bring out a very important concept that we hear all the time in Krishna consciousness. But sometimes, although we hear it, we don't grasp how deep it goes and how true it really is. That the mind is what gives sense or a narrative to everything that we experience. So one thing happens after another, and we think of the first thing as the cause and the second thing as the effect. When we mentally describe to ourselves internally a particular thing or a particular situation again and again in the same way, it becomes that way. Just stop and think about that for a minute. That you describe something in your own mind in a particular way, and you describe it again and again in that same way. You begin to inhabit that reality, that this is the way it actually is, when actually the only thing that's happening is that your mind has whipped up this, sort of blurb, like we see on the internet all the time. There's a picture of something going on, and below there's a little caption. So the picture is what's actually going on, and the little caption is somebody's explanation of what's going on in the picture. So this is what our mind is doing all the time. Dhyayato vishayam pumsam sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama krodho vijayate krodho bhavati samoha samohat smriti vibramaha smriti brahmashad buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. Of course, that's second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verses 62 and 63. by contemplating the object of the senses, one develops attachment. From attachment, lust develops. From lust, anger arises. So it all starts from contemplating. And when you think about the process of Vedic understanding and its basic underlying message, it's that the mind needs to be controlled, because if the mind isn't controlled, the mind will conjure all these Dungeons and Dragons and false narratives. And as the weeks go by, as the months go by, we begin to take them as factual reality, when in fact they are not. We give them a cause and effect relationship. And it's really very, very mysterious. Of course, the words being used here are also kind of mysterious. Golden egg, the universe is described as an egg, Hiranyamaya. So the universe is like an egg in a number of ways. We heard a few verses ago that we have first a layer of water, then a layer of air, then a layer of fire, and then et cetera, et cetera. And these layers go outward, kind of like what you would see in an egg. An egg, if you cut it across, it has the yolk on the inside and the white on the outside. So this kind of small sphere or ovoid, and then outside it is a larger area of a larger substance, and outside that is a larger substance, and a larger substance, and a larger substance. And as Sariputta once said, since these things are 10 times bigger than the previous thing, we cannot process that, because if it was just 2 times bigger, you could kind of get a visual representation of it. But each successive covering is 10 times the size. So in mathematics, that's called a logarithm. So when something is 10 times the size of something else, it's logarithmic. And it's funny how logarithms pop up everywhere in the world that we live in, that our hearing is logarithmic, our seeing is logarithmic, that if it was on a regular basis, then we would all the time be in a situation where things would be too bright or too dark for us. Or similarly, from audio perspective, things would be too loud or too quiet for us. But as something gets louder, it actually begins to affect us less. So in engineering, when a sound is 1,000 times electrically more powerful than the previous sound, it's only 3 times as loud. So this microphone has a certain voltage across it, and that voltage is could be measured by, some ammeter or some voltmeter. And if you made that current 1,000 times more powerful and fed it into the same amplifier, it would only seem 3 times as loud. If you made it 10,000 times more powerful, it would only seem 4 times as loud. That's what logarithmic means, So this cosmic egg expands out and out and out and out and out. Each time the thing being 10 times more powerful or 10 times larger than the previous thing. A couple of days ago, I was in the walking in the morning, and I had a body camera, and it was very dark, and I thought, oh, as I walked by a school, they had one of those flashing LED screens like this, and it had the time and date on it. So I thought, well, I'll take an image of that time and date. And I thought that I'd taken a good image of it. Later on, when I looked at the camera footage, the whole street was almost completely so dark you couldn't see it. But that image was like a sun was going off, and you couldn't read anything on the sign at all. Because again, the visual, as something gets brighter, it has to get 10 times brighter to seem one time actually brighter. It has to get actually 10 times the energy of light to become 1 times more bright. So again, the logarithmic concept. And of course, it's an egg. The material universe is an egg because it has parts, like eggs do. And it evolves on its own, like eggs do. So if you leave an egg to itself, you haven't killed it by boiling it, or it's been fertilized, then it turns into a chicken after some time. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to add something or water it or, give it some kind of chemical. It does it. It's perfectly capable of doing it all on its own. So the universe is like an egg. It will eventually evolve. And of course, scientists study how we go from one thing to another, from one thing to another. And again, this is a chain of cause and effect. And we begin to take it very serious, that now we have an explanation, that we had the Big Bang, and there were these, first of all, this plasma, and then gradually we got, at least the way the narrative goes, some kinds of atoms, and then gradually it cooled down enough that it could form what we call regular matter, and then dust clumped together and it formed various clouds, and eventually those became massive, and they collapsed on one another and became suns and planets and all this other stuff. And this all sounds nice. It's a sequence of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. But we've heard it so many times. This narrative has a plausibility to it, just because we've heard it so many times. And that's basically all it is. Anytime you place two things of cause and effect next to one another, you can always doubt whether there's really a cause and effect relationship between those two things. Because ultimately, how do we know? And ultimately, we say that when you pour lemon juice into milk, it curdles, and we see it happen. And so we say, lemon juice curdles milk. Okay, that's simple enough. But then a scientist would go deeper and say that certain kinds of acid cause a certain reaction. And now we have steps in between. Instead of just a jump between milk and curd, we have this whole explanation of how on a chemical basis something happens, something else happens, something else happens. And this qualifies as an explanation. But eventually, we really don't know. You can always ask, well, what makes the curdling process work? Why does that work? And so what I'm trying to bring us around to is this idea that the mind simply seizes on something and repeats that something, and it becomes a reality for us. Somebody else's mind has got another whole song and dance going, but our mind has one particular kind of explanation, and we're repeating it, and it becomes, for us, reality. So that is why we have to be very careful, and that's why Krishna consciousness is what it is. We have to be aware of what kind of cause and effect chains the mind is putting before us, because eventually we'll take them seriously. We play them enough in our brain over and over again, we will take them seriously. And oftentimes, this is exactly why people have issues with one another, and why we become morose, or we become deluded, or we become depressed, because we play one of these things over and over in our mind, and it takes over, and it for us has a reality. Nobody can hear those little things that are going on in our mind. Only we can hear them. So people don't know why we think the way we do, or we feel, or we express ourselves the way we do, because they can't hear those narratives. But we can. And so we have to be very careful. And so when one controls the mind, the supersoul is already reached, as we hear. And to illustrate this point a little bit more, last night I was having a dream. And I don't know, usually I don't remember my dreams, but in this case I did. And this is a typical dream scenario, that I was dreaming that I was driving a car, and I was driving a car in Anderson, Missouri. Now, this name sounds very strange even for me to say these days. I grew up in Anderson, Missouri, which is a small town, about 1,000 people. Most people on planet Earth have never heard of it. It's inconsequential in many different ways, even more so today than it was at the time when I grew up in it. But, of course, the town didn't look like Anderson, Missouri. I know what Anderson, Missouri looks like. If I had, 15, 20 years of experience in a place, you know what it looks like. It didn't look like that in my dream, but I took it to be Anderson, Missouri. And actually, I've noticed that in dreams, I have a dream version of New Vrindavan. I have a dream version of New York. And they don't look like New Vrindavan or New York. But in my dream, when I'm there, I think now I'm in New York. I think I'm now in New Vrindavan. And this always strikes me as very peculiar. Why? Visually, it doesn't look like the thing that I know from reality it's supposed to represent. But somehow, I take it to be that way. And, of course, I was driving this car, and I noticed that I was on a high hill, and there was a sharp turn, and then I might be going too fast to make the turn. Of course, I didn't make the turn, the car went off, but the car disappeared, and I wasn't falling, I was flying instead. And I took this all as normal. In a dream, the most outrageous stuff happens, and you take it as normal, just like what happens in our daydream. Of course, in our daydream, we have a more profound sense that this is actually reality. But in one sense, the two things aren't really that much different. Again, the mind is creating these things. What is real? What is happening? How do we understand it? What is our emotional response to it? Am I afraid? Am I happy? Am I satisfied? Am I agitated? Whatever it may be. So yesterday we were discussing, chapter 4 in Bhagavad Gita. And there's this interesting section from verse 25 to verse 33, where Krishna lists all these different kinds of yajna. And these yajnas are supposed to give one transcendental knowledge. And control the mind. So there, he just lists these different kinds of scenarios. One can be a yogi and be worshiping demigods. One can be a yogi and be trying to focus the mind on what he's hearing in Bhāgavatam class, or what they're reading in some scripture. Or one can be a householder trying to control themselves from illicit sex. And then we find that one can be drilling the airs, the life airs, allowing them outgoing air and trying to, when outgoing air, usually when you breathe out, your lungs collapse and your body becomes smaller. And when you breathe in, your lungs fill up and your body becomes a little bit bigger. But in yogic breathing, you do the opposite thing. You try to contract your body when you breathe in, and you try to expand your body when you breathe out. And then that's called equalization, rechaka. And then if you can stop it altogether, you get kumbhaka, which is the process of appearing not to breathe. So, by regulating life airs, we control the body. Now, how does an air control the body? These all, again, we're getting cause and effect. But this is the way it's described in the Vedic literature, that life airs are controlling the body. There's 10 principal life airs. And by manipulating them, one can control the body. And, I've had practical experience of that to some extent, of controlling the breathing. We can all tell, and this is a good thing to keep in mind. If you're ever in a very intensely emotional state, if you just force yourself at that moment to breathe very slowly, that emotional state will diminish. And they teach soldiers this in the U.S. Army. So works not only for yogis, but for, modern military personnel too. That if you can just change your breathing, you can change the way you react to things. Again, somehow, although it's for a Western person, if you told this in some scientific forum where people were discussing things and you said, well, air affects the body, they would think, what kind of nonsense is that? But actually, it's quite reasonable. And so, cause and effect. What is cause? What is effect? And people in our modern world, they have this whole concocted understanding of what this world is, how it works, and its materialistic basis. And because it's all wrong, then eventually they become morose, and eventually things happen to them that they didn't expect. Because whenever you have a misconception of the world around you, then things will happen in the wrong way. So as the cosmic egg is unfolding, the Supreme Lord is entering into it. It's this giant ovoid, and then the Supreme Lord agitates it, and it begins to develop various expansions and offshoots and subsequent developments. It does these things. And as that's happening, we see gradually unfold before us the universe that we presently do experience. So by performing various kinds of yajna, or by performing yogic meditation, or by simply trying to control the mind to bring it back to Krishna, you'll be surprised how many emotional and mental dragons are slain just by that simple process. That Something is nagging us, something is bothering us, we just bring the mind back to Krishna. Something is attacking us over and over again on a mental level, we just bring the mind back to Krishna. And eventually, we suddenly realize that, like the dream, yesterday I was being bothered by this, but today it doesn't. Where is it today? It disappeared. I'm being bothered by something else today. Yesterday it was something completely different. So, as I think it was James Milton in Paradise Lost said, the mind is a thing of itself and can create a heaven out of hell or a hell out of heaven. So the control of the mind is not just a yogi thing. It's not just a yagya thing. It's not just a thing for Vedic culture. It's reality. So Krishna consciousness is nothing more than kind of bringing the mind back again and again to Krishna. But I find, I bring my mind back to Krishna, and then I think, oh, can I really trust Krishna? Is he going to do something funny to me? Will I really like it or will I really hate it? But I'm starting to trust Krishna more as the years cross on. And it's interesting that with all the philosophy and everything else, I can still recognize the fundamental resistance that's still there, and that resistance, we know it comes from, as Prabhupada says in the purports, years and years and years of rejecting Krishna and acting in a wrong way. It's habit. So as the mind builds up a false picture of things by repeating a false narrative, so similarly the body picks up a wrong response to things by acting in the wrong way. So we have a repetitive habit. And all these things can be offset by simply trying to bring the mind back again and again to Krishna and thinking, well, hey, Krishna, so I see I'm in this situation. What should I do now? What's this? What's up? What are you trying to tell me now? Why is this happening this way? What's my message here? Help me figure it out. And in this way, you try to figure or connect with the Supreme Lord in the minute-to-minute chain of cause and effect as our internal life, our cosmic egg unfolds. Here the cosmic egg is growing a mouth. And we see that we have reality is based on, you have a sense organ, the mouth. You have what that mouth actually is supposed to do. It's supposed to taste. Taste is a subtle sense object. And then it's made out of various matter. So we've got earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So it's made out of that. And then we have a demigod, the fourth thing. A demigod that controls that mouth, So we have these four things. And they're all working together to create the reality that we imagine that we're in, which is nothing more than an 80 or 90-year dream, as opposed to the night, 15-minute dream or whatever it takes for that one. So it's the same way. And if you just try to keep focused on Krishna, then most of those things, those night terrors, those dragons and dungeons, those agonies of the moment will just, like a dream, be gone the next day. Sometimes we do have to do things about things. Situations have to be addressed on the external world. But most of what happens can be addressed simply by the exercise of reconnecting ourselves to the Supreme Lord. Essentially, the quality of our chanting will make a big difference in the way we perceive our whole world around us. So if we just can grab ourselves by the scruff of the neck and force ourselves to chant better japa, a lot of stuff simply disappears into thin air, like the dream where you go off the highway on the side of the mountain and suddenly the car disappears and you're not falling, instead you're flying, and you don't even think it's anything strange. So anyway, we'll stop here. And I'll ask if there are any questions or comments from our audience here. Anybody? I'm going to give you this thing because I no longer trust this whole system. Last 3 days, I wasn't able to hear anything that our Raj Mohan said. I wasn't able to hear Matanga. I wasn't able to hear anybody. Even Lochanananda's Sunday feast was like completely unintelligible. So this won't amplify you, but it will make it so that whoever watches on YouTube will be able to hear what you say. You don't have to turn anything on, it's just on already. Right. So now it seems gross and subtle. Right. It's difficult to understand that it's the personality within this egg, but then it kind of seems like nothing, and then the gross comes and then subtle. So can you just... Yeah, I'm as bewildered as anybody else about that, because these descriptions of the creation, there's more than one of them, and they're a little bit different, which again, there's nothing particularly unusual about that. It's being looked at from different perspectives. But part of the problem is the fact that we have a mismatch between Sanskrit vocabulary and English words, So sometimes the English words make something a little more opaque than it necessarily has to be, My favorite verse is that one that we just discussed in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where it says that this kind of offering is where how does it say it, that the offering merges entirely into transcendence, because what is consumed, the offering, and the person making the offering is all merges into transcendence. It's a really bizarre sounding phrase, It isn't really when you take it apart, but it seems that way. And as far as these descriptions of how material energy is gradually coalescing and how it's unfolding, we can understand it to a certain extent, and then to go beyond that, oftentimes it just gets kind of hard to describe in any further detail. But why, I read this through a couple of times, and there's a couple of questions I have about what comes first and why it's talking about the demigod in charge here when we haven't got demigods yet. We've just got these positions, and it appears that the certain demigods that are also in charge of either material things like Chandra, the moon, and etc., and Surya, the sun, is in charge of vision somehow or another, which kind of makes sense, some of that kind of makes sense. But other aspects of it are hard to pull together, which always puts us back in the same category as the material scientists, that no matter how well you explain something, you can always push it further and think, well, how does that work? And at some point, you're just kind of left scratching your head, whether you're a scientist or you're reading Bhāgavatam, and in any case, you've got the same situation. So again, the chain of cause and effect, if you turn up the power on the microscope, at some point, things start to disconnect. It always happens, no matter who you are or what you're describing. It always goes so far, and you kind of, well, I'll let it be at that. Maybe at some point I'll read it some more, and I'll get a little further down the rabbit hole. But right now, that's as far as I can get. So the universe is infinite. So no matter how you describe it, you can always describe it in more detail. And that's why we only have as much detail as we have, because it's impossible. And Krishna makes it that way, so that no one can say, well, I really know what's going on. We all know it to a certain extent, and then at a certain point we just kind of drift off into a world where we're not sure of what's going on. So that's how I'd respond. I think Hadai had a question over there. Mm. Well, if you just do the process of talking to Krishna, that's fine. You may not know. Krishna may not say something in a way that you're going to hear it in so many words, but Krishna is always talking to us. The reason he doesn't make it any clearer than he makes it is because of us. We want to believe something that's not real. So Krishna has to kind of work around that, But as we become more progressive in Krishna consciousness, as we progress down the road, we will hear Krishna much more clearly. So right now, we kind of learn what Krishna is saying to us by looking at something over a period of time. At least this is the way I experience it. And seeing, well, what did I learn from that? Especially if you look at something that happened 5 or 10 years ago. You can kind of clearly see what it was that I was learning during that time. But at the time it was going on, I certainly didn't have much of a clue. And so similarly, there's things going on right now that I'm wondering, hey, what's up with this? What am I supposed to learn from this? But I know that in a few months it'll start to come clear, because the real quest is to just pray to Krishna that I do the right thing, I have the right attitude. And we know what the right attitudes are. We're hearing them every Bhāgavatam class, We're supposed to be humble, supposed to be surrender, supposed to try to understand, supposed to tolerate happiness and distress. These are all those kind of attitudes that we're learning, and then we just have to try to apply them. And this is what the Shastras say, that as one becomes a progressive devotee, eventually one can talk to Krishna. We were discussing the other day about Gaurikishore Das Babaji. He talked to Krishna or Lord Chaitanya. And this is not unusual for people who are, very far along. But for us, it's through a glass darkly, as they say in the Bible. It's not quite as upfront yet, but still you can notice things. If you're paying attention, you can notice that Radha, Govinda have different expressions every day, and that there's things going on there, and you can wonder. Some cases they aren't going to tell you what they're up to. In other cases, they might. So depends on because they've got their own stuff going on. It has nothing to do with us. But we are also part of the whole thing. So in some cases we can know, and we have. Srinivasacharya, and we were talking about the other day, Narottam Das, they actually had pastimes where, finding an ankle bracelet or, some other kind of thing, boiling milk and having it burn your hands, et cetera, et cetera. So these things are really there because the spiritual world is not a different place. It's this place right now. But because of our separated consciousness, we can't experience it. Because of our years of ignoring it, our years and lifetimes of wanting to focus on our own, narrative, the picture and the caption below it, our own caption. We've been following that. And if we can learn to stop creating our own caption, and just trying to hear Krishna's direction, either through the scripture or through the devotees or through Srila Prabhupada's narratives, et cetera, then we can more easily tune in. And goes from through a glass darkly to face, as it says in the Bible, so it's the same kind of thing, that it's a little obscure, but gradually from Nam comes, as we know, Rup, then from Rup comes Gun, and from Gun comes Leela. So these are, as we were talking about, the universe becoming more tangible. So the spiritual universe becomes more tangible. First, the name becomes tangible. Then the form of Krishna becomes tangible. Then the qualities of Krishna become tangible. And finally, we're actually participating in the Leela, the pastime. So it moves in that same way. But that's as layers of our conditioning, layers of our own mental mind games as they subside, as our illusions, as our false representations of things get cleansed away, then we can get there. Yes, there's the little microphone there. Again, this microphone will not amplify you. But it will allow people on YouTube to hear you. Yeah. Why not? You don't always what?
Every letter I write gets answered.
Right,
I
right.
it's so tangible in everything. It really it works. And so, and writing letters it's just sweet. It just feels good to the heart, and you can just write something, and it just feels nice.
I never thought of writing letters, but that's a good idea. I mean, in other words, there's no reason we can't have a dialogue with Krishna. Again, we can be mistaken because, sometimes our own desires will push aside what Krishna is actually trying to tell us. But if we continue to do it long enough, we begin to get purified enough that these conversations are more and more uh, between us and Krishna. So, there we go. So unless there's any other further questions or comments, we'll end the discussion and everyone can go down for breakfast. So all glories to Śrimad Bhāgavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Chandrasekhara Maharaj ki.
Hmm.